Okay, hello. Today we are going to have a debate between CFO and CISO. We only have CISOs in the panel. The topic is the collaboration between CFOs and CISOs. Are there any disagreements? And we have 4 panelists joining us. And we hope to have a good discussion on this. And the format will be, we'll ask questions to each one of them. Ideally the same question. If we move out of the script, then we will ask some other questions relevant to what the discussion is about. And we do this for all the questions that we'll have. We'll try to limit each of the answers to 2 to 3 minutes so that we are able to squeeze in as many questions as we can. So just to set the context, in today's digital world, cyber threat is a growing risk and concern in all enterprises, with the potential to create serious financial and reputation damage. This also means that the role of the CISO is becoming increasingly more important. There are rapid advancements in the cyber threat landscape, and security technologies have to counter those threats. Like I already said, the panelists are all CISOs, and many of them are very highly experienced, 10 plus, some of them 20 plus years of experience in this line. And the theme of the discussion once again is how the CISOs and the CFOs collaborate. How do they fund their cybersecurity programs? And if you think about it, CISOs and CFOs are actually working on the same goals. That is ensuring compliance, ensuring business continuity, data privacy, data security, minimizing risk and preventing business losses. I think that is a common goal which both functions have. So it is quite obvious that they have to work together and make sure that the common goals are met in the interest of the enterprise. So first question that I will ask, and I will ask this to Manoj. We should understand that cybersecurity is a business issue. It is not a technology issue, and the risk need to be managed with as much discipline as we manage financial risk or operational risk or compliance risk. So how does the CFO and other CXOs get to understand the cyber maturity of the company to be able to take collective ownership and responsibility of the cyber risks? And do you feel there is active support of top management to help your team drive the cybersecurity projects? Manoj.
Thanks for the question, Joydeep. So as I see it, if we need to be able to have an active engagement of all the CXOs in the organization, not just the CFO alone, we need to have a very clear-cut understanding of where our risks lie and what is our maturity of our cybersecurity and even privacy for that matter, to a really good extent. So to do this, there are multiple ways of achieving this, task. One is we should be able to do an independent cybersecurity maturity assessment of the organization, right? We can hire any of the best auditing agencies or experts in the area who can give us a view of how well we are performing with respect to the different cybersecurity domains. And it can also be, secondly, what can also be done is that perform a benchmarking versus your peers, for instance, right? And in the same industry, assuming you are in a singular industry for that matter. But there are, of course, organizations who span across different industries too. But then that's going to be a very interesting, a very interesting challenge to do the peer benchmarking as well. That is a second aspect on that. Thirdly, I would also see that how we can do this maturity assessment versus an industry best practice. Let's say it can be a NIST cybersecurity framework or any of the other well-known NIST standards or ISO 27001, so that you can gauge yourself against these standards, right? So when you perform an assessment against the different industry leading benchmarks, it'll also help you gauge yourself on your performance against each of those domains and control structures, and help you build a roadmap to improve on your cybersecurity maturity. Yeah, the second part of that answer.
Oh, you have not completed. Go ahead.
Yeah, so second part of that answer about engagement at the top management level. I think when we have a very visual depiction of the maturity of where we stand here today, and also pool in the support of the top management and even board for that matter on how we intend to grow our maturity in each of the areas of the report, so to speak. We should be able to bring in their support and bring them on board in this journey together.
Okay. I will have some questions follow up on that. Probably I'll cover in one of the other questions. Rohit, would you like to go ahead on the same question, please?
Sure. Thank you, Joydeep. So, echoing what Manoj said right now, on the typical approaches for measuring the cyber security maturity of an organization. Primarily, if you see, we need to have an internal program which refers or which adopts such industry benchmarks, and your entire security strategy needs to be based on this. While you implement, of course, different frameworks call for different approaches. If it's ISO 27001 requires 100% compliance to be showed, and with sustenance as well. But if you look at programs like NIST CSF, they have got a very methodological approach similar to what CMMI has, where there are tiers mentioned. And these tiers actually help the senior management, the CXOs as well as the board committee members, to relate to such maturity assessment models like CMMI, and translate that into cybersecurity program of the organization, and understand where exactly the organization lies in terms of maturity. This actually helps them to understand the cybersecurity posture of the organization, and that in return gives us the required support from the CXOs and the the board committee members, and so on and so forth, where we report into. So I would say that yes, cybersecurity maturity with periodic roadmaps, with target maturity scores to achieve, and then ideally giving that assurance to the management by having an independent assessment done at the end of every annual or every year to validate that the assessment done by cybersecurity team in terms of the maturity that they declare, and an independent view on that, what is the actual maturity that the organization has achieved, and whether it has met the target in line with the expectations of the management or not. That gives an additional assurance, and I feel that is very important for an organization to develop a program like this, adopting standard best practices, and doing a self-assessment in addition to an independent assessment as well on periodic basis, and giving that additional assurance to management. Now, to get the support, primarily, the management requires clarity as to what is the threat perception, or what is the risk appetite of the organization. That is something very important, and if we are able to translate that into business risk, is easily acceptable by the management, and that ultimately translate into an active support. So these are some additional points from my end, in addition to what Manoj.
Okay. Pawan, same thing to you. I think many of the things you say would have been spoken. I mean, this is the problem when you have multiple people answering the same question.
So
But if you have something to
I'll be
add-
using it. I'll be taking a practical approach than a theoretical approach, because both of my panelists have taken a theoretical approach of adopting ISO 27000 standard, talking about security maturity, and then an IST framework. Yes, these are good things to have. But if you really want to know the maturity of the organization, run a phishing attack and see the result. You will practically see that how efficient your security maturity of the organization is and where you stand today. The number of people responding or clicking on the phishing link will actually tell you where you stand and how vulnerable your organization is, because until and unless there is a user action, there cannot be a security attack, right? Every attack has a human intervention into the picture, and until and unless that has been undertaken, this attack should not have been successful. So your maturity is practically demonstrated with a physical representation or of a simulation attack. That so it is important that you should, after the conducting the phishing attack, take that learning and then move on to the theoretical aspect of adopting a particular standard or a framework in defining the cybersecurity framework for the organization. And that is where you will get to know that what our technologies are required to be implemented. While defining security security framework for the organization, you obviously require CFO's support along with CTO, because it is actually CISOs can define this framework but cannot implement it. Otherwise, it will be a conflict of interest. So you require your CTO's help in implementing those technologies. And once and hence both of them, CFO and CTOs has to be taken into confidence before implementing. And whatever is the recommendation, it has to support the digital transformation of an organization, and what CFO is focusing upon and implementing in the coming future. Transitioning into a language what they understand is not difficult these days, because of thanks to hackers, or I would say the bad actors. There are enough attacks happening across the globe which are giving worrisome night to everyone in the organization, specifically at a senior role, because everybody is answerable today and they have to provide answers. But it is important for a CISO to speak the language which people can understand, and specifically at a board. If we start using the technical jargon, team will have hard time to understand that. And whatever has been recommended as part of the cybersecurity framework needs to be complemented and supported with true evidences of what benefit it can bring into the organization. And that's where the true picture comes into the picture. True picture comes in where you, once you run the phishing attack, you will see that which all areas needs to be focused upon, and how then you have to drive it step by step to make it a success within the organization and keep the organization safe. So I will restrict my response to this particular question here. We'll again deep dive onto multiple aspects as we move forward.
Okay. Archie, you're the last in this list. Can you give your points on this as well?
Thanks. Very important question. In fact, without the support of the leadership and the top management, the board, not only the cybersecurity project, but no projects in an organization can function or evolve. So the buy-in, the understanding, the approvals, all of that is highly essential and critical for any projects any other project to execute. Now, if we talk about the understanding around cyber maturity between the CXOs and the CFO, and how they are able to understand the ownership and responsibility of the risk. So overall, while the security expert or the security decision makers or the CISOs are the owners of the security risk and action owners and making sure the mitigation is there, the overall owner of any of the cybersecurity risk, as per what Gartner says, is the CEO, the core, because that's where the organization's business decisions, from the sales perspective, from delivery perspective, from operations perspective, from technology perspective, all decisions are unified. And that's how, for any organization, it's the CEO who is the custodian owner of any risk within the organization. Now, coming to the responsibility of a cybersecurity leader to make sure how these risks are clearly cascaded, interpreted, not cascaded, but better interpreted with the CXOs is diluting and making it more simplified so that it's well understood in terms of the impact, because it should be backward. So from the impact perspective, how a particular risk impacts their business area or business unit, let's say if it is a finance, how it would impact finance and the overall organization in parallel, how if it is a delivery, a CDO or COO, how it would be impacting the business, the gross margins or revenues, and how it would be associated with those, the reputational impact from the clientele, customer success, all of that. So how that risk is impacting their operations or their division, their ownership is the best method. And now going backward from the impact, it's about the risk. So how that risk and the possibilities. And if the organization has the understanding around the possibilities, or let's say the risk appetite is very clear within the organization, how much risk an organization can take, be it cyber risk or be it insurance risk, be it any kind of risk in terms of delivery impact, or clients or revenue, anything, or financials. So that is something which should be very clear with the CISOs or the security decision makers. So if they are able to resonate and understand the risk appetite of the organization, they will be able to respond and clarify about those risks and the association of the impacts.
Okay, moving on, some of you touched on speaking the language of business, cutting jargons, articulating the problem and solution in easy to understand language. Now, while you do this with your CFO and perhaps other top management, CXOs, which are your peers, does the CIO, CTO, whatever it is called in your company, sometimes both are there, do you work together and do you together approach this problem of how to make it easy to understand? Because there is a IT angle, there's a security angle, and I think both of you probably need to go together and make it easy for people to understand. What are the potential areas of disagreement with the CFO, and how do you resolve those areas of disagreement? I think this time we'll start with Rohit first.
Thank you, Joy. I would say that no security or any security success can be measured without involving all the stakeholders. Security function alone cannot drive the security initiatives. Yes, they are the SMEs, they'll strategize, they'll draw up a roadmap, but ultimately when it comes to implementation, you will need your other stakeholders. That's where if it's a manufacturing organization, you will also have IT and OT respective stakeholders coming in, where they collaborate with you. The implementation roadmap buy-in is there from both the stakeholders as well. And then comes the next challenge. And if it's before I do that, if it's a financial institution, then of course the IT areas will come in, the IT stakeholders come in. And once we have an agreement with that, once we collaborate and we fix up and we prioritize a roadmap, the next challenge that comes in is to get the required approvals from the respective CFO, CXOs, or the corporate planning team for the budget approvals. This is where the actual risk is, because till now, the collaboration is with CIOs, CTOs, which understand the technical language, which understand the technical risk that you're coming. When you are interacting with CFO, you need to quantify all this cyber risk. And not only the CFO, I would say, when the discussion on risk that takes place with the management, while we help them understand or realize the impact of a potential risk, at the same time, we also need to quantify the risk, which is very readily acceptable and understood by the senior management, the CFOs, CXOs, and the board committees. So that is a very critical aspect over here. I feel that this is the main area where you will find there are a lot of discussions that take place in prioritization of certain initiatives, in getting those approvals, justifying the ROIs, uh, helping the CXOs and the board members to understand the tangible and intangible benefits of those, because not all initiatives that you take will have a tangible outcome which can be measured, and we can go ahead with the binary yes, achieved, not achieved. There will be a lot of value additions that will be done through certain controls that brings in, which help us to proactively prevent certain things from happening. So the only way that we will be able to justify that is, I believe, by way of risk quantification, making all the top management and the board members understand what they understand better, which is the figures, converting your risk into all commercial impact, and then going ahead and taking the required approvals that are required to implement our initiatives. Again, while we are the ones who strategize, who draw the roadmap and take the stakeholder buy-in, who are the implementers. So we ultimately end up overseeing the entire implementation as well. And this end-to-end process and of overseeing and then realizing what is the actual risk that has been mitigated and what's the residual risk, and then quantifying it, and again presenting it to the management for them to understand better and be in a position to take the decision to treat the risk. So these are my views on this area.
Okay. Manoj, you go next.
Yeah, I think to me it's more of a risk conversation. I think I agree to most of what Rohit just conveyed. Right, it's about how do you communicate the risks to the management. But that said, we also need to ensure that it is translated into an understandable language to non-security stakeholders. Right, I mean there are many non-security stakeholders in the CXO suite sitting there, and some of them who are also, for example, a CFO who is looking at giving us some budget to achieve the intended roadmap. Right, so that is definitely going to be an ongoing challenge for every CISOs out there, because it is like Rohit said, it's easy to have a technical conversation because we live and breathe processes and technology day in and day out, with a CIO or a CTO who understand those elements. But it might not be the case if we are having a same conversation with a CFO who is more inclined to see numbers, right? But that said, in my opinion, we will not be able to quantify every risk possible. That is another challenge, right? I mean, that is a desirable thing to do, but we might not be able to do it in every case, right? But even though we might be able to say that there is going to be, let's say, a reputational loss or a commercial impact, if you need to say that will result in how much of dollars, up or down, that is going to be a bigger challenge, because security is a very, very unique space where many of these elements cannot be necessarily quantified at all times. I mean, it's unlike you do, for example, if you're running a cybersecurity metrics program for an organization, you can say patch compliance is this and antivirus compliance is this, and these many machines are encrypted and whatnot. And those are quantifiable control maturity metrics, right? But how do you quantify risks? That is a very, very large topic of conversation. I mean, that goes much beyond theory and focus more on the practice side of things, right? So ultimately, I think to summarize what I'm just saying, it's more on how do you simplify the risk statements and get the CXOs to understand, appreciate what lies ahead if some of these risks are not mitigated, or if we implement if you do not implement the full length of controls to mitigate a certain risk or set of risks, right? What is going to be the impact? But that again has to be an ongoing conversation. We might not be able to achieve it in a single shot 1 hour call, or I don't think that's going to be an easy thing to do. It's going to be an ongoing conversation, and to bring them up to speed. And I can tell you, if you are very regularly engaged with your CFOs, and even for that matter, your board, you can really, bring their cybersecurity and privacy knowledge to a reasonably good level where it makes it much more comfortable for you as a CISO to have that conversation. But that itself is a security learning and growth for all the involved parties. And that to me is the way to bring all the CXO suite professionals to huddle and achieve this much bigger tasks of growing the cybersecurity maturity and so on.
Very true. I think quantifying everything is next to impossible in any line or any function that you belong to. Some of them are qualitative, some of them will be probability of some occurrence, etc. So I know quantifying is not possible in some areas at all. Pawan, any more points to add on this? Or more or less?
I echo to what my both panelists have said so far, and that's where it's a blessing and a disguise as well. So both have to go in parallel and have to be taken care accordingly. The way I look at it is when you talk about CISO and CIO role, both are the two wheels of a same vehicle. They can't go two ways. So if they have to go together, they have to. If there is a turn, they have to turn together. If they take different ways, then you are going to collapse. So you are going to have loopholes, and you are going to have challenges within the organization, which will be much bigger challenge to resolve than resolving a security concern. It has to be taken in that way and be looked at from that aspect. And both are the people who are driving two different strategies for the organization and have to convince CFO and other senior management. Like I said in the first question, it's the language which they can understand and which is easily correlated to the map with the business strategy, which people can understand in the boardroom. Fortunately, I would say in the BFSI, it is the task has become much more similar because it's a regulator. We are regulatory driven, and there are many things which are simplified by the regulator as well. The first and the foremost thing which is defined in the policy itself for the insurance companies, like regulator himself has defined in the cybersecurity guideline that CISO has to have a working relationship with CIO, or the head of technology. So if that is already defined there can't be two different ways these two people are taking. So CISO can't take a different path than the CTO or head of technology or CIO, whatever we call it, depending on the organization. Similarly, both have to go to board, to senior management, to board with the same goal and talk about the same objective which they are trying to achieve. Then comes the various compliances which we have to regularly maintain and submit a report according to the regulator. And that's how organizations are sustaining today. That would be my take, Joydeep, on this.
Talking of reporting, I mean, at least in BFSI, the CISO cannot report to the CIO, so that there is no collusion. I mean,
absolutely.
So it again depends. Which perhaps in all industries that is not mandated, but clearly in BFSI, it is mandated that CISO has to report to either chief risk officer or somebody else. It cannot be CTO, so that they don't together they do something which is not in the interest of the company. So in all your cases, I mean, your reporting relationship is either with the CRO. I mean, what are the relationships that you have, Pawan?
So for insurance, it is very clear that the CISO has to report to head of risk, primarily because these are the risks which are getting highlighted and goes up to the board level, and that's where it stands. And like I mentioned in well, I was answering your previous question, that both are two wheels of a same vehicle. So both have to go together. we can't go separate, and we can't club together as well. So otherwise, it will be of conflict of interest. So that's how it has to be managed and has to be gone. Similarly, I think in the banking as well, for insurance, like I said, that the CISO reports to the CRO or the head of risk, depending on the designation, whatever organization decide. Similarly, I think for banking as well, it is the similar ground which is there. So I'm not clear on that. I have not looked into it, but I think it is similar to what is defined by the IID as well.
It makes sense not to have the two report to the same person and not the same person having both the responsibilities. So
absolutely, it's maker and checker.
Yeah, very much so. Again, I think if Archie has anything else to add on this, we are talking about how to sensitize the CFO to understand cybersecurity better. How do you work together? How does the CIO help out in doing that engagement with the CFO? And how do you sort out differences or disagreement that you might have with the CFO? Archie, your take on that?
Sure. Thanks, Joydeep. And in fact, as an organization, if it is coming from different vertical or the kind of nature of business, it would change from case to case. For example, if it is a manufacturing, if it is a single own leader or chairman led organization, or if it is a group of technical experts. So it moves from nature of business the organization does at first. Second is many of the organizations in today's world, since everything is digitally transforming, it's a very essential need for CHRO, CFO, COO, and CEO and everyone to be completely abreast about technology, cybersecurity in all the current trends. In cases where a security leader has a challenge or an opportunity to clarify questions from the CFO perspective, stepping back, how I executed it, I first invested some time learning into corporate finance and how things shape up from the CFO perspective. First, tried to learn that language. And then whatever project it helped me in such a way that whatever projects I was executing, irrespective from the risks, because risks are clear. Every organization would have a reputational risk or some other associated risks, which we can talk about to the leadership or the C levels where CFOs, CEOs. However, the nitty-gritty goes into the financials, how it impacts, how a cybersecurity project would have an ROI. If we are able to clarify around a cybersecurity project and its ROI, there would be a seamless process of there won't be any negotiation or clarification required by the CFO. It would be clearly signed off and the project will execute. And that's how I've executed in my organization. I tried to, from corporate finance, what I learned, if we are able to convert a project outcome into the NAV values and all of those, how it links, what is the ROI, how it rolls back. That's the language most of the financial experts would easily be able to understand. So converting that into those interpretations and associating those with a risk, because it would not only be a CFO who would be making a decision around, he may be making a decision around an overall budget approval, but there may be a business justification, there may be an operational justification, all of those, it would go through multiple cycles. So as a board, as the CEO, CEO or CDOs and all, if they are able to understand and associate those risks, it's a piece of cake.
Okay. We briefly talked about metrics. I think Manoj mentioned a bit about metrics and probably one or two other friends also did the same. Now talking about metrics, I mean, I know that is a big challenge and I think we also heard about certain things are not measurable, not quantifiable, etc. But whatever best you can do when you measure the success of the cybersecurity program, that is the best way of being able to articulate to the senior management and CXOs that these are the areas, whether it's quantifiable or not. These are the areas which we need to be wary of. These are the areas which are less risk, etc. In quantifiable business terms wherever possible. Now, I think Manoj probably mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, you said something about comparing your organization with your competitors, maybe outside the industry as well. I mean, somebody has a good cybersecurity program, so why can they not be a model company as far as cybersecurity readiness or cybersecurity maturity is concerned? Now, how do you do that? I can understand you doing some metrics, which is some numbers you put wherever possible, and you come up with a scorecard of what your numbers are. But how do you know about other competition? I mean, you don't have access to their scorecard. So if you're going to compare, how will you do that? I mean, I know there are some independent cyber ratings companies which are there, and most of you will be familiar with those. I know for a fact that insurance companies, when they do cyber insurance, they get the scorecard of that company, compare it with scorecards of other companies because they have access to those subscription models of those cyber rating companies, and they are able to arrive at the comparison between companies, whether it is within industry, outside the industry. They have access to the cyber maturity of every company, because that is the job they are doing when they are deciding what is the premium for cyber insurance. So there I can see an example where a comparison can be done. So I was just trying to understand when you don't have access to those independent rating agencies where you can subscribe, or even if you appoint an independent consultant and say you measure us, they will not tell you that your competition is so this number and you are this, you're better than them or you're worse than them. They will not tell you. So how do you gain the confidence of CFO and senior management about the adequacy of what program you have? And how do you kind of say that we are better than them or we are worse than them unless you are able to showcase that? Manoj, you want to say, you would probably have an example because you said that in one of the earlier discussions. Would you like to help us understand how do you compare others when you don't have access to others, their maturity?
So it's not about one organization having access, or if you consider my organization versus other competitor organizations, it's about if I engage a third-party consulting firm to do a security assessment of my organization. Let's say we hire a Big Four, for instance, okay? And if you are scoping the assessment, let's say against a NIST cybersecurity framework, so it gives us a structure and a baseline against which we ourselves will get assessed, right? Now, these are the Big Fours who are also having a foothold in other competitor environments as well. So they have the pulse of the other peers as well. They are able to, and to do my particular exercise, they are not necessarily going and doing the same exercise in that organization to tell me in NIST domain 5, this is what that company is, right? They don't have to do that because they already have the visibility to the cybersecurity maturity of that organization. Now, there is a ballparking of those ratings which are going to be there because they're not necessarily doing a full-blown on-the-ground assessment at the same time when they're doing ours, right? So if they are giving us, let's say, access control as a domain, and if they're giving me a rating of, let's say, 4 out of 5, maybe my competitors rating, they might just give a 3.5 out of 5.
But you will not know that, no? Manoj, you will not know that the other company is 3.5. See,
that has to go by the consulting agency's advisory only, because we cannot verify it.
And they will not tell you. I mean, they are not allowed to tell you all that.
Yeah, they will not. So they will not tell you the company's name also.
I mean, not the name. Whether you're better or worse, they will not even tell you that. They can generally say you're average or you're slightly better than average, but they will not tell you, because one of the things, I mean, when I was somewhere involved in all this. I mean, the standard things that we used to hear from other CXOs is that company is better than you. Better than us. This company is maybe not that good. And just some loose talk will happen about our company worse than others, and they are far superior to us. And this is something which we don't like to hear. If we are doing a good job and we hear these kind of loose talk, it doesn't help. So that's why I was coming from that perspective that there are tools available in the market which you can get a score. It's like CIBIL score. Everybody is familiar with the CIBIL score. As when you take loan, you get a CIBIL. Before taking loan, everybody has a CIBIL score depending on your credit rating. So similar lines, you have a cyber score which is available through some subscription based some companies where you have the capability of knowing your score. You can know the score of others because there is a subscription capability that they give you that you can benchmark against 10 other companies. Will tell you the composite score. So similar to your personal ratings where you get, I think, 300 to 900 other scores, CIBIL rating or experience rating. In cyber rating also, they have a score from 300 to 900. They'll give you 700. And you are allowed to take subscription to know what is that composite score, not knowing the in-depth score for each of the parameters, how they arrived at that number. Where they will say so-and-so company is 750, so-and-so is 800, and you'll get an idea of the comparison, which is a tangible answer to the people who will make loose comments and say, no, our security is not as good as others, or just give some names.
So this is one. So this is one approach, right? Now you do a paid subscription to understand. Now there are models out there where you can have a subscription where it will continuously do an assessment of your environment and benchmark you and tell you are at 800 out of 900, right? There are subscriptions or services out there which will give you your rating in similar lines, can also tell you that organizations in your industry are averaging at 825, but you are at 800 without telling you the company name,
right?
Without still not telling you the company name. Now, the third model is the model that you are referring to, that there are subscription services where they will also tell you the company name as well.
Which you have to subscribe to. You can subscribe to the company.
Course, but provided that those companies have are open to releasing their information as well.
Actually, Manoj, maybe you must be knowing much better than I do, but I have done a service contract with a company. I'm not going to name names, where they have given the score and we have said, I want to know the scores of ABCD also, so that I know where we stand vis-a-vis the others. And I can subscribe to that service for each pack of 5 or 10 or 20 or something, and you can rotate those 20 and shuffle around other companies, and you'll get to know how you stand against others. There are services like that which are existing, which really makes life easy for the CISO to say that here is the actual number. So don't give comments without any substance, which is something which people keep on doing that. That is one service I found it to be very useful when in my time,
If we are able to link the ratings of competitor organizations together with the competitor organization's name, I would definitely agree that could possibly ring a bell better with a CXO suite than, let's say, a Big Four saying that your competitor X is at this, right? Now, we will definitely need to take that with a pinch of salt as well at the same time, because they are here to help us improve our maturity and help us provide a good quality service, right? Now, as an approach and as an appetite, if we are saying that we do not want any ratings without giving us the competitor names, then that would require that consulting company to give, have a very different approach, and also breaking an NDA which they signed with their other clients as well. Now, that is a different topic of discussion. But what I'm saying is that there are so many different models which can be followed, right? What you are saying is one model, and there are two or three other ways of doing it as well. But ultimately, it's about how are you, having this conversation with the CXOs at the same time, right? Now, all said and done, in my mind, if you throw in a spider chart which says against each of these so many domains, this is where you are and this is where you want to go, and these are the 200 initiatives that we want to do in the coming 2 years from now, and each of these initiatives will cost X amount, right? You can have a risk to maturity growth to cost related mapping, and where possible also indicate an impact as well if that does not happen, right? Now, it can be too complex for a CFO or even for that matter CEO who is heavily business driven to actually consume, right? So like I said earlier, it has to definitely be a series of conversations, and it will take time to bring them up to speed, and we definitely have to mellow down on the communication piece where how it becomes easy for them to understand. Otherwise, you can talk about, maybe phishing attack is an easy example to explain because everybody understands phishing attacks, though no organization can say that we are 100% phishing attack proof, right? We can have plethora of technologies, spend millions, in all forms of processes and technologies, but ultimately it just takes one click to compromise an environment, right? So we are at that level of risk these days, right? So that is where the level of understanding of all of our management staff, when I say management staff, I'm saying the CXOs and including the board members, right? The conversation with board has definitely improved over time, right? Unlike 5 or 10 years ago, where getting a cybersecurity budget used to be very difficult, and it used to take so much of efforts to do so. Now there are many organizations who have board members who reach out to the CISO and ask, "What do you want?" Right? Or they ask, "Okay, there is so and so attack I just read about somewhere. Can you tell me something about it?" Or they have some understanding of it, but they want to have a discussion with the CISO to understand how are we prepared without defenses if such a thing has to come our way, right? So that is a very, very interesting conversation, and what ensues is a very productive discussion and a liberating one even for a CISO, especially when you have somebody to discuss on these topics, right? Otherwise it becomes a very, very lonely battle, right? So how will you bring all of these stakeholders together and bring them up to speed on the various challenges in the security industry? What's happening new? You cannot, I know of security professionals who just keep forwarding some latest attack trends to many of the CXOs, and they might not even read it, or even if they open it, they might not understand what that means.
Forwarding,
right? They have so much running in their head, right?
Actually, nowadays you will find a lot of companies having at least one person who is an IT person in the board. That trend has started. I know of many companies where IT people have joined the board, who are therefore they are taking ownership of whatever is happening in the CISO world and the CTO CIO world. So that, and they are part of the board, so they have full visibility of what is happening elsewhere, as well as having the IT security background.
That's a fantastic trend. That's a fantastic trend, because they also happen to become the bridge between the CISO and the board as well. And they are also, because they are also part of the board, they also are able to converse between all the parties involved. Right. And also help with some very, very crucial decision for the organization.
I think this is has been a very long discussion on this question. But others, Archie, Rohit, Pawan, you have anything to add? Basically, we're talking about the adequacy of cybersecurity, how to convince the CFOs and others that it is adequate what we have by quantifying. We talked about all these things. Anything to add, Archie, to what we have discussed already?
There's another compliance, which is SOX, SOX, from the financial perspective. Now, another best practice which the security leaders can work upon is align their security objectives or the projects in the language of SOX. So that, because those compliances, those audits are more financial driven or finance driven, and the CFO would very clearly understand the importance around A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, all those parameters in terms of security aspects. Because SOX will require, let's say, the ERP is there, the financials is there, so they would have to comply around those areas. How the initiative or project is in line with SOC and how it would also impact the finance, this would give the financial decision makers more clarity around, okay, yeah, this is something which can be substantially important for them and can be a differentiator.
Rohit, quickly, 1 minute, 2 minutes, anything to add?
Yeah, I have a different perspective on this, and it's my personal opinion. I probably will be scared in going and subscribing to a services which very readily shares certain information on maturity, which domain is stronger, which domain is weaker, and subscribing, and then myself being a participant and sharing information of my organization as well.
No,
my personal opinion is that I would
interrupt.
prefer.
Rohit, just 1 minute. Just interrupt. The example which I gave was the composite score is what you're having access to of other companies. You are not aware of 10 parameters. What are the individual scores? You just know that his rating is 750, you are 720, and that's about it. You're not allowed to see what is inside. So I think just to kind of clarify the point that you were making.
Fair point. But then again, I'm just sharing my personal views and probably not to offend the point that is made. It's purely that with the growing sophistication, the attacks and the information that you have in public domain about you, yourself, or the organization in that case, that is quite critical. So I would rather be part of research companies who conduct surveys. These are anonymous surveys. There are set questions, knowing only the sector, the region as well, that is also equally important, and answering those questions and getting a summarized report at the end of it. There are organizations like World Economic Forum Journal who conduct such interviews, and which are quite credible report that they given and quite respectable as well, with the CXO as well as the board members. So in my personal view, my personal approach would be a bit different. I would get those information, get those benchmarking about my peers, specifically from my specific sector, or maybe if not that, then generalizing that sector as a manufacturing or a BFSI completely, and then making a business case which I will present it to my CXOs, stitching it along with the certain activities. So I probably that will be a repeat of what Manoj has said, but yes, it will be supported with a continuous governance program where periodically I keep on visiting the CXOs and the board members, and I keep updating on these developments. At the same time, I'll also be presenting the metrics, not as a full-blown 30 control kind of a metric, but I will have very few critical ones identified, supported with the exercises nowadays that every organization does from cybersecurity perspective, conducting red teaming assessments, conducting phishing simulations, assessing the awareness. So it gives a 360 kind of an assessment for us. We have the cybersecurity maturity assessment as well. We take that and we create that case and we present it to the management. We show that this is how our posture is. We give them that comfort. We grow that influence on them by telling them and making them realizing them that in cybersecurity world, in today's world, there is nothing called as a foolproof security. It's a myth. So we have to first realize we will undergo an attack at some point in time or the other. How we are working towards, how well our controls are working, which are those critical areas, what incidents are there to actually showcase that, and what is our preparedness to ensure that we prevent it. Having a scorecard based on such kind of approach, I believe would be a better option. Supported with this as a reference point as to where the industry is moving. Sometimes even when during the budget approvals, you will get questions like, what is the industry doing? do we really need to invest it? So from a cost benefit perspective also, which may differ from an organization, such contents from a scorecard and such contents from benchmarking ourselves in the industry usually helps us to grow that influence with the CXOs, CFOs, and the board members and get the required approvals to go ahead. That is what I'll additionally just add my perspective.
Pawan, anything to add?
I have a mixed response of all the panelists, so I'll try to sum it up in a very few words. So I have heard Manoj, I have heard Archie, I have heard Rohit. So first of all, when it comes to benchmarking, it has to happen at a similar pace, and it has to happen with the same set of questions which have been floated to multiple organizations of the same industry. Then only you can do the benchmarking. And if you approach multiple service provider, multiple big fours, everybody has a different way of calculating a risk and give you a maturity score. There is no standard formula which is there. How I can say that confidently is because I have worked in similar scenario in one of the organizations. We used to calculate the risk as well and give it to different organizations. There is no standard formula which is there. You can build your own formulas. You can project the risk accordingly, and then ask the organization or define a roadmap for the organization to be followed in next couple of years, similar to CMMI or any other standard which you pick it up. You define a roadmap of 3-year, 5-year, and try to reach to that maturity level, whichever is defined. You're going to define it as part of your journey to that. Once you define that, then obviously the buying of the management has to be taken into the consideration, and then convincing management is not going to be too difficult these days, because we know where the maturity is. And it is not too difficult to find out what other people in the industry are doing when you belong to the similar industry, like we are in insurance. So there is a close group of people we talk to, and we can handfully name the companies which we deal with and talk to. We can pick up a phone and talk to the CISOs and understand that capturing. Not every provider who is providing you that kind of a maturity score can give you that visibility, which you can get it from the close group itself, because they may be working, they may not be working for other organizations. So that's why I differ on that particular point, that you can do a benchmarking. It could vary, it could give you a different result. But if you're doing a benchmarking, it is a similar set of questions which need to be given. And you can never trust those answers which have been provided by a different organization as well, because there is no validity. It's an individual perception which has been submitted, may not be validated, may be validated in certain aspects. So it will always be debatable. Why I say it is debatable, like since I have worked in doing a benchmarking and providing maturity scores, so it varies, and that's how I can confidently say that. And if we as an individuals have to accept it that it could vary. But yes, that's a question which I've been asked by all the leaders sitting at a CXO level, that how we compare it, how we map it to a different industry, similar size, similar standard, what they are doing, what others are doing, and how should we do that. And that is something which you have to convince your management, and you have to come up with your own security framework which you think is right for the organization and take the organization to the next level. You may be second in taking a lead in certain aspect, but if you know that this is the best thing you can do for the organization, because at the end of the day, as a leader, it is your job to secure the organization. That's a step you should take and convince your management accordingly. You may be the first one, like I said, but if that is in the right direction, I think you will get full support from the management. That would be my take, Jadip.
See, moreover, when you base it on survey questions or questionnaire being circulated, how truthful is the answer? Because it is something you can, are you 4 or 5? You'll say 5. In some cases, you'll say 4. And you do some kind of a round robin method so that the score looks good. So that is one thing which I have never believed in. This doing a survey in 100 different companies, it is like voting also. You do polling outside after the election, and then the result is, sometimes it is more or less the same, but people are not truthful when they are answering. I mean, and there is no way to validate that. They can say anything and get away. So
your second my thought,
the survey questions on questionnaires, and like you rightly also said that different companies will have different frameworks for asking questions, and the questions are different little bit here and there. But the persons who are answering the questions, how truthful they are in answering what they should be putting and what they actually are. You know. So it has to be some measurement which has to happen without their knowledge. That is the only way to get a answer where it is truly comparable. I don't believe this questionnaire, again, that is a very strong point of view, but that's my point of view. It has to be something which is happening behind the scenes. You are not aware of how you're getting measured, but some algorithm is running and telling you this is your score. Nothing can be better than that, in my opinion.
That's a desirable
Absolutely.
thing to have. That's definitely a desirable thing to have. And I really, I'm not sure if that is definitely possible. Even if it exists, I would really question its integrity of its completeness of the information in that. Right? Of course, I don't want to make it a CISO to CISO debate here. I do have certain points on whatever Pawan just mentioned, but I think we should move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we are almost out of time. I think one more question, perhaps we'll end it. I think we already touched on the subject. One of the things I was going to ask is about how many of you have cybersecurity? I'm sure all of you have cybersecurity as a board meeting agenda. It is there as an agenda item, irrespective of which company or industry you belong to. Nowadays, earlier it used to be BFSI mostly, and later on maybe telecom and others. And I think now everybody has cybersecurity in the board meeting agenda. And CISO is very much in the board meeting, not called later and as an afterthought. I think given the exposure that you get in the board and the knowledge of cybersecurity in whatever they need to understand that the board members also have and the senior management also have, I think it is becoming relatively easier for getting buy-in for the cybersecurity spendings. What is your opinion on that? Do you find it easy to get buy-ins and approvals on spending? And how do you measure the value on investments? And how do you convince the board whenever they are not convinced that this is something we should be doing? I think Archie, can you go first on this? And we'll keep it to 2 minutes each because I think we are running out of time. Let's quickly wrap it up. Archie?
Sure. Thank you, Jagdeep. In terms of spending, so primarily as an organization, the primary objective is to make sure that whatever the budget is there for the entire year, that's all part of it, and the strategy should be they're built onto it so that all the investments fall basis on priority. They may be one-off projects which may be substantially different, which may be falling out of the budget or the set budget that is there at the start of the year. For those, these could be VUCA projects, maybe some ad hoc upcoming projects because of some critical business requirement, or let's say some changes in the environment, or let's say changes in the way business works or operates. In those particular objectives, primarily, if again, in what I've been doing is understanding and explaining the business outcome, the benefit from the business, and the ROI, again, coming from the business, because security overall as a whole, there may be a lot of reputational plus as well a future prospective business that may come up with a lot of opportunities associated with the business. Now, primarily, in summary, it's part of the overall budget that's already there, built up strategically. If there are some ad hoc upcoming budget, those by default usually have a buy-in. If there would be, everything comes planned as part of the strategy at the start of the year. There may be anything coming as an unexpected project that's already discussed and executed, why that project is important. And since that is already executed, the budget is already added to it.
Manoj, next, anything from your point of view?
I think from a budget standpoint, see, we could have a list of things that we would like to do in the year, which can be projected, and we can forecast that to a certain extent and work on getting the budgetary sign off and so on. Again, like I said earlier, it's going to be more of a risk conversation, and I think Joydeep, like you said earlier, the entire CXO suite are working together these days. right? Though they play different roles, ultimately their objective is to help the organization successful at the end of the day, right? CISOs might be looking at a very different tangent of things, from an attack surface perspective, and looking at it from a perspective of what could go wrong. Now, how can I protect, right? Maybe that is one perspective of looking at it, and maybe translating that to something simple in simpler, non-technical language to the CXO suite to get the sign off. But going by what Archie just mentioned, there could also be surprise investments which might come on the way. It might not be a completely new technology, because if you have to go into a completely new technology which you had not forecasted, then there's something very, very surprising which came out, right? Which was not thought about, or maybe a completely new risk which we did not think about, has started to appear in the horizon, to which we need to protect against, right? That could happen, but then might not be an everyday thing, right? But then what could generally happen is that, for instance, if you have taken up a technology which has got 10 different modules and different subscriptions, and maybe you suddenly feel the need to add a certain subscription to add a specific detection or a protection feature into your cybersecurity stack. Now, that is something that you might want to add as an ad hoc investment during the course of the year. So those are things which might have to go for, let's say, an exception approval and so on. But again, the method of conversations will have to be the same, right? You have the same set of folks, you have the conversations, and see what can go wrong and how we can protect the organization from that particular event from materializing, right? So those are my thoughts on that.
Pawan?
Yeah. So I echo the points what Manoj has said. There will be additional investments which may be required once you go through your cybersecurity journey, and those needs to be catered accordingly. And that's a point of discussion may happen at a board level. So what you mentioned, Joydeep, it is no more a point of concern now, because CISO is already been heard at a board level and people understand. Like we started our conversation, I mentioned that particular point, that where it is a matter, cybersecurity is a matter of everybody's concern now. Even at a board level, it has been taken very seriously, and people have been heard accordingly. So like Rohit was also mentioning, there is no 100% cyber security. It is only mitigation steps or mitigation controls which you can put in order to protect the organization, and that is how it has to be taken. It is a journey. We have to go step by step. We have to take every day as a new day. See what is there on the table, take it forward accordingly, and do our best to whatever we could do to protect the organization. That is how it has to be taken.
Rohit, you go last. Anything
Sure.
to add?
I will just summarize in few key words. Nowadays, post-pandemic, getting budget approvals is not a challenge, especially with the kind of global events that have been taking place. But if you look at the discussion primarily that goes around and the communication that happens, ideally leads to the prioritization in line with the business objectives, rationalizing it as well, because not everything that is required to be procured can be done in one go. So that needs a rationalization as well, which is a subset of prioritization itself. And of course, comparing it with what is the target maturity that I want to achieve in the current context for which I'm taking the approval. How am I going to achieve that, and how aligned it is with the business objective? That is, I think, along with the intended ROI, how we are justifying those ROI as well, whether tangible, intangible benefits out of it, and the value that we get with the initiatives that we take. If we are able to summarize and communicate that in an effective manner to CXOs and to the board members, I feel getting a budget approval is not an issue. And of course, this is something I probably might be just summing up and summarizing what everybody has said.
Okay, I think we are out of time. I'm not sure how much we have overshot the time. I just want to thank all of you to speak about your respective CISO journeys and how you work with your peers in the CXO community. And I hope for the audience it was informative and useful, and some points which would be for them to mull on. Thank you once again, and have a good evening.
For more updates from CXO TV, please like and subscribe to our channel.